Bittern are really fantastic. Like I've said before, they're indicator species, but they're like this sort of totem animal. When people understand what it is and start to catch sight of everything that goes with the bittern and how remarkable it is as a creature in itself, people really fall in love with it. And they want to restore wetlands and they want to boost this creature and give it a chance. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for a community to rally around and get behind it.
Hello, kia ora. I'm Anna.
And I'm Callum from Conservation Amplified.
And you're listening to the People Helping Nature podcast.
Our mission is to make conservation mainstream, one topic at a time.
In this episode, we're going to take a look at our wetlands, but in particular, a really special bird in there called the bittern or the Matuku-hūrepo. And we're stoked to be joined by Helen Jamieson from the Forest Bridge Trust, who does a lot of work with these amazing creatures. Welcome, Helen.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Kia ora, Helen. Would you like to start by introducing what the Forest Bridge Trust does and what you do there?
I've been with the Forest Bridge Trust for probably 4 years now. 4 years and a couple of months. But it started back in 2013, becoming an official charity the year after that. We're a farmer-led initiative from the west coast of the mighty Kaipara. It was a couple, Jill and Kevin Adshead, who have an enormous working farm out there, 1,300 hectares. And they had the vision of bringing kiwi back to that area where they'd long been extinct probably for 50 years or so. Long story short, did a successful translocation to their property and realized that they actually needed, as those birds thrived, even though the farm was massive, they would need 10,000 hectares to thrive as a population. And so they had the idea of working with landowners from Tawharanui, where there is already a population of kiwi, all the way across to their property in the west, with landowners to trap for mustelids to knock those numbers back so that kiwi would be safe to travel across what they called the forest bridge. That's how it started. And now there are 3 kiwi populations, Tawharanui, the Mataya one, which was Kevin and Jill's farm, and in the middle where I'm actually sitting in the foothills of Mount Tamahanga, where a successful translocation's been happening over the last 3 years. So it's a pretty amazing community-driven conservation initiative, and I'm a project manager working with them. Now, basically, we're working on South Head, which is looking to be a very strong bittern stronghold. So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
That's really fascinating, and I love the approach of the Forest Bridge Trust. There's a lot of good elements in there. We actually recorded an episode with your operations manager, Matu Booth, as one of our very early episodes. I think it was about 5 or 6. So if you're curious about this, definitely recommend going back and listening to that. But for today, we're going to focus on a really cool component of your work, which is bittern. So can you start by telling us how you got into Matuku bittern conservation?
So I came to conservation. We live in this beautiful area. We've been here for 16 years. Gosh, we love it. It's stunning. Aren't the forests beautiful and so on? That was the level of engagement. We really appreciated it and love it. But then I started to see 4 or 5 years ago signs about the kiwi returning to Tamahanga. And I dropped in to things that were running at the village hall and started to scratch the surface of understanding what was at stake. Like, that is really a huge deal to have a kiwi translocation happening, that they'd be coming back to the mountain for the first time in over 50 years, and how I could influence that and how I need to participate and be a steward of this incredible landscape. And so that's how I learned about the Forest Bridge Trust and started to become involved in conservation at the same time. And then in that first year of working with the charity, I was in community liaison, which is working with landowners to make sure they've got all the tools they need, they've got the skills they need, they know about workshops and so on that are happening, they know how to record their data, which is really crucial in terms of forming a map of what's being trapped and where. And in that first year, it was suggested that we get involved with Bird of the Year. Matu, actually, his most adored bird includes the koremako, and so we were all set to reserve the bellbird and be the manager for that campaign, but it was already taken. So obviously Matu was devastated. Obviously the kiwi is already being pioneered by Save the Kiwi, even though we worked a great deal with that bird at that time. And long story short, wetlands are really represented by bittern. And that's a very important feature of the landscape. in the forest bridge. And so we were managers for that campaign, and it was a real drinking from a fire hose experience. And that's how it all began, leading all the way through to July of this year when our funding came through from DOC for a 2-year project to work with 3 species on South Head, working with the community to protect and enhance those species. And one of those is the bittern.
Can you describe to us what a bittern Matuku-hūrepo looks like and how they behave?
So they are a really big bird. So they weigh about 1.5 kilos. And if one was in your front room, just as it was standing, not if it was stretching its neck up, it would be about as high as your dining room table. So they are very, very big, stocky herons. So they've got those enormous yellow feet, like a pukeko, but with slightly shorter toes. And their colouring is very like the kahu, so very like the harrier hawk. And they really blend in with their background. Very, very, very hard to spot. So there's 2 reasons most people don't know about the Matuku-hūrepo. One is because their numbers are so incredibly small. They're critically endangered. We are the last generation, as Wendy Ambry from Love Bittern says, who can save the bittern. And the second reason is that they are so good at camouflage.
Right. And what role do they play in the wetland ecosystems?
They're an apex predator in wetlands. What's magical about them for me is that if you have bittern near a wetland, it's a sign that despite everything, it's doing really well. They need clear, multi-depth water. So they need sort of 25 centimeters or so for them to be able to feed. They can't feed in murky water. It has to be clear because they've got to see what they're going to pounce on. They feed on frogs, baby eels, some quite big eels, as well as some beautiful photographs out there of them catching eels. And because eels are so slimy and slippery, bittern have amazing coating to their feathers that stops that sliminess. It stops that becoming a thing on their feathers. It's really amazing. They're very well adapted to what they do. And obviously little fish, that's what they feed on too. They're a wonderful indicator species for the health of a wetland. And so that's our ambition. We've been restoring our tiny wetland here at home. It's only 0.5 hectare, but that would be all of my dreams come true if a bittern decided to drop in, use our wetland as a bit of a dairy on its way around the rohi.
So we've established that healthy wetlands means bittern will choose to live there. But you've mentioned they're really elusive before, and one of my favorite facts are their defense mechanism, or what they do when they feel threatened. Can you describe that to us? I've never actually been fortunate enough to see it myself.
We see it a lot in photographs, hey, that's the sort of classic photograph of a bittern where they raise their head, point their beak to the sky, and their wee eyes appear. They can still see forward. And they just hold really still. And that's because of their ropor habitat, where they match the reeds and they can even sort of sway with the reeds as they're doing that. But in our modern landscape, it's become a bit of a disaster. If it's doing that on a road, it's come out because food is in such short supply. Over 95% of our wetlands have been destroyed, and they are still being reclaimed as we speak. It's astonishing. And so the food supply is much reduced, and they're coming onto the roads to eat skinks who are basking in the warmth of the road, for example, or they're on the roadside in the deep ditches where there might be some sort of life they can feed on. So they're being driven out of those camouflaged landscapes and onto the roads and the roadsides. And freezing when a car is approaching is a disaster. It's not going to hide you from anything. It just means you're going to get struck. So car strike is a really massive challenge for bittern right now. It's really, really impacting their numbers. It happens many times every year. And the other thing is that when you're in a landscape with introduced mammalian predators, they have a tremendous sense of smell. And so if you're holding still, you still smell fantastic to a predator. So a feral cat or a dog that's not under control, that's really bad for adult bittern. But for fledglings and for chicks, stoats, ferrets are really terrible, as well as feral cats and dogs, obviously. And so that, again, makes them very vulnerable to predation. This fantastic protection/survival mechanism that's developed over hundreds of years that's worked really well, it stops working when the playing field changes so dramatically.
We've got other species that do that, right? Like kakapo freeze in face of threats as well.
Yeah. It seems so stupid, but it was really great. When your threats were aerial predators, it's a great strategy. But that's changed in such a short period of time that there's no time to adapt to that. Adaptation takes hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years.
So what does that mean for their decline? You've mentioned they're critically endangered. Do we have a number for New Zealand bittern populations?
So no, we don't have a number. The Great Matuku Muster is a really fantastic national citizen science survey that happens. And from that, we're only monitoring male bittern because only the males boom, and that's what you're listening for during the Matuku Muster. From that survey, the estimation is that there's less than 700 left in New Zealand. They're also found in Australia and New Caledonia, but several sources say that New Caledonia Matuku-hūrepo is now extinct. And in Australia, there's a fantastic project they're doing called Bitterns on Rice or Bitterns in Rice. It's really worth looking it up on Facebook. It's a fantastic initiative where they've discovered that rice farmers can really help. It's fantastic breeding territory for bittern. That project just gives me chills. It's a wonderful example of adaptation happening. We don't need to go all the way back to how it was. We can, in Australia, they're working with what is and managing to boost bittern numbers, or at least hold hard on the bittern numbers whilst working with farmers. There isn't an initiative like that we can do here, but we can do little bits of restoration. So people like me with a small wetland where it can be like a food stop, a little pit stop, instead of a bittern having to fly hundreds of kilometres to find another healthy wetland or getting struck on the roadside because it's desperate for food and so it's eating skinks. If enough of us can restore little pockets of wetland and provide little food banks that don't have to be breeding territory, then that can really, really help bittern to find enough food to survive. They need a lot of food because they're such a huge bird. Yeah, it's introduced predators and a destruction of their feeding grounds and breeding grounds and places they can hang out and rest. When 95% of those have gone, of course numbers are going to drop. They're adaptable, but they're not miraculous. I think, just over these last few days, we've had massive flooding in our area. We're just on the very northern edge of Auckland. And I think people are starting to become aware of the importance of wetlands. We can erase these things from the landscape, but the water still needs to go somewhere. And wetlands do an amazing job of cleaning the water. So I've just done a video about this actually on our Facebook page, showing that the water coming through our river was, brown and full of sediment and, churning along. And the water coming down to meet it through our wetland and through our forest is running completely clear. It's still extremely deep. The levels are very high, but all that filtration has happened. And so the filtration to remove sedimentation, which obviously bittern really need, they can't feed in water that's full of sediment. And also their sponginess, how they absorb the water and slow it down as it battles away through the wetland vegetation. Wetlands are crucial for future planning around mitigating the impacts of climate change. So bittern are really fantastic. Like I've said before, they're indicator species, but they're like this sort of totem animal. When people understand what it is and start to catch sight of everything that goes with the bittern and how remarkable it is as a creature in itself, people really fall in love with it. And they want to restore wetlands and they want to boost this creature and give it a chance. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for a community to rally around and get behind it.
How aware do you think people are of bittern?
It would be a good experiment for people who are listening to this to ask 4 or 5 friends, could you tell me about the bittern? Could you describe the bittern, where it lives, what it looks like? And I think people will be really surprised. I really was. Nobody knows about the bittern. A few conservation hardcore people know about the bittern and we're fanatical, but there is so much room. And that's why I'm a big fan of the Bird of the Year. Obviously, it's funny and it's silly and, what impact can that have if you do well in the Bird of the Year? But I think people need to see its picture. They need to hear its story. So I think things like marketing the bittern and having people understand what it is and what's at stake and what responsibility our generation bears for its survival, I think that's really exciting.
Can you take us a little bit on a journey how you went about it at the Forest Bridge Trust to make exactly that happen for your local community and the bittern that live there?
I'm not saying we've cracked it by any means, but I've seen the lights go on for a lot of people. Nikki is our fantastic media person at the Forest Bridge Trust. She does an amazing job of getting information out in the right way to the right people. And during our Bird of the Year campaign, for example, we did interviews with people like Alex Flavel-Johnson, who works up at TRI, and they're doing an amazing job of restoring habitat for bittern and starting to see amazing results there. Alex really works tirelessly for bittern. Connecting with Wendy Ambery, as I've mentioned before, from Love Bittern, who does amazing workshops for schools. So she was able to come with Alex and do a workshop for our local community. Over 80 people came to learn from them about the bittern and how to restore their wetlands. We did art competitions, which in the first year we probably had maybe 16 entries, which was really great, from all ages up to 18. And we should probably do an adult one actually as well. But the last year that we did it was 2024, and we had over 80 entries. We had people sending in photographs of the workshops they'd done with their wee tots at, preschool, all the way through to people at high school, sending us things that they'd done for their final exams, which were bittern based. So super exciting to see, there's so much to share for people around all that, from the environment all the way through to how it impacts the community, and watching the really creative ways that people start to share that information. We've got the Bittern Conservation Trust, who have been set up to protect and, boost bittern numbers in New Zealand. And also a guy called Peter Langlands. He's really worth finding on Facebook with the work that he's doing if you want to see footage of bittern.
It's really good.
Oh my gosh. It's really pioneering stuff that he's producing there. So it's really the interest and the fuel is there. It's just we need to keep plugging away and reaching more and more people, because you can't help but say, do you want to come with me to listen for booming tonight? In those months of September, October and November, you can't help but talk to people about it, and they're interested. So yeah, all sorts of things, from art to workshops to social media stuff to radio interviews. We need people to be advocates and pointing to the bittern, and then the bittern will take care of the rest, I think.
It sounds like there's a groundswell of community growth of awareness in bittern needs. I'm just curious, I've taken is it the blue pill or the red pill? The one where you go into the matrix or you exit the matrix and you become this full-blown conservationist. And so sometimes it's hard for me to see the journey that people go through because I'm at the other end of it. But what do you think is there a moment or a thing that you would change people's mind when you see people getting into bittern conservation? Or is it just a gradual thing? They hear it here, there and everywhere and eventually they come listening? Or yeah, I'm just thinking that, is there something that converts people, or is it unique for each person?
I think it's unique for each person. And there's some blanket broad strokes you can apply that will appeal to all aspects of what could jumpstart somebody. And it might not be what you do. It might be what you've explained to somebody, or what you've had them involved in, from a workshop through to coming out, sitting in a camp chair, rugged up, listening, and then that person tells someone, or they take their children with them next year. So there's a number of things. If I think about hooks that I've seen people be galvanized by, it would be that it's so rare. A community can have a bittern and it's like their resident bittern, and so they see it a lot. When they realize how rare that is to have that bittern in their community, that's a real light bulb moment. How magic and incredible the bittern is. So all of its incredible ability to be so cryptic, just to remain in disguise, to be so elusive, even though it's so enormous. That's another thing that really captures people's attention, that it really needs our help to knock back predators, to restore food stations in the form of wetlands, or possibly even if someone's got enough land, then they could also be creating a breeding habitat. To be able to participate in something that matters so much, I think that's a really big thing I see across the conservation landscape. This is desperate, or this is important, or maybe both. I can do this with these great people often, and so my work matters. And I'm going to meet amazing people. I'm going to create this incredibly valuable landscape legacy that money can't buy alone. It has to involve mahi and commitment and participation. And so when people catch sight of that it's a treasure and they can do something to preserve that treasure, then light bulbs go on all over the place. I find that in conservation, especially internationally, but we can be guilty of it here, where only the dreadful message gets conveyed, the doom and the gloom and the despair. And I feel really strongly that on that message, we must tack what you can do, what you can do. Right now, you could give money to this. You could go and find a trapping group, let us help you find one. You could put traps in your backyard and check them. Here's some videos on how to do that. Yeah, you could restore a wetland. And that's a really big one. I'm working with a gentleman called Pat McDonald, his business is about, restoring wetlands in the region and has been for, many, many years. He talks about, and it's true, is people want to do it, but there's this big sort of mystery that lies between them and taking the relevant action. And I'm a great example of that. I'm working in conservation. I'm keen. I'm capable. I'm asking people, how do I restore this? And I'm getting so many different opinions, and they boil down to keep stock out, get rid of your pest plants, and plant. And that's great, but I can keep stock out, which is what we did. And how do I get rid of these pest plants? Am I going to destroy all the aquatic life if I spray? Which ones do I get rid of first? I've got pampas, I've got blackberry, I've got convolvulus, which is a nightmare that never ends. I've got kikuya, I've got, just endless pest plants, and it's 1/2 hectare. So it is tiny, relatively speaking, but where do I start? And that was relentlessly paralyzing.
This is your wetland at your house, right?
Yeah. And I think people are in that situation. The desire is there, but this kind of like, where do I start? There needs to be that's what our tiny wetland is about. This kind of breadcrumb trail to follow of how do you get rid of these pest plants? What do you plant? Where do you plant it? When do you plant it? How do you get hold of those plants? And so when people know the how, they've got the why, but the how can be a real roadblock. And so the Forest Bridge Trust really helps people with that, with fencing and planting. The idea is to protect the Kaipara Harbour from the sedimentation that's coming into rivers and then going out into the harbour. And that can provide really valuable feeding grounds for bittern.
Yeah, awesome. I want to touch on 2 points you said there. Firstly, your tiny wetland, you're posting your learnings and experiences about that on Facebook, right?
Yes. Our tiny wetland.
Okay, we'll put the link in the description if you're
Brilliant.
thinking about this. You also mentioned something really important is that people do care. They want to make change, but they don't know how and they don't know if they can make an impact. I was digging into some data recently, looking at a Ministry for the Environment report and a doc survey, and it showed that I think it was 88% of Kiwis believe the environment's important. A majority of Kiwis surveyed said it matters to them. Only 18% in this specific research said that they think they understand the health of the environment. The majority of people didn't know or think they could help themselves. And I was talking to a friend just yesterday. At the time of recording, we had the devastating landslides in Mount Maunganui. So climate change was a hot topic we were talking about. And we were just talking about how people get bombarded with the negative messages and the guilt tripping. And constantly yes, we can do things to help climate change. We can reduce our emissions, etc. But we don't necessarily see the outcome of that directly from our actions. But I think this is a big part of why I'm so committed to conservation personally. And I think is what you're saying about bittern is that when you get into conservation and you look at ecosystems or endangered species, your actions today can have a measurable impact that you can see and you can have. And there's joy in that. There's community, there's fulfillment.
I think the thing that struck me from what you're saying, Callum, is it gives you a sense of purpose. There is a real sense of powerlessness in a bad way from being inundated with this terrible news on a global scale. But if I start where I am, which is Jane Goodall's message, then that powerlessness and dread is diminished, and I start to see the changes in the wildlife. I start to see the plants growing. I start to see the resilience during floods and so on. And so it's really, I think, to take that macro sense of despair and fear and feeling paralyzed and hopeless, and to bring your attention back to the local, there is something you can get involved with, and you really matter. You're not a number in a conservation situation. You're a person, and you're relating to people, often from every age demographic. It's so medicinal. It's like this amazing hobby that all ages can be involved in that makes a massive difference. Like, I look at the people who've plugged away on tamahanga for over a decade, trapping and preparing until, going through that permit process for the kiwi, and then it's happened. It's like just plugging away inch by inch by inch, and that really matters, and it really improves your mental health. It improves your physical health from being out there. Kevin and Jill had said with the Forest Bridge Trust, that's another great example of little by little inching forward really makes a massive difference over time. And that's what our planet needs.
Totally, I couldn't agree more. I think community activation is a beautiful way to share experiences and bring everyone on board. And speaking about purpose, you talked about the Great Matuku Muster before, which is a nationwide initiative giving people the purpose of getting involved in bittern conservation. Can you tell us more about that?
It's such a magic initiative. It's very important for surveying the population. Obviously, from a scientific perspective, there's very important information and data that comes out of it. Using citizen science means that the word is spreading. More people are going out each year to sit and listen. More people are inviting their friends to go out. More areas are getting covered. Even if you don't hear anything, it's really important. And so in 3 months where the bittern boom the most, they do boom all year round, but male bittern will boom strongly in September, October, and November is the main month for breeding, where they're defending territory and attracting a mate. So that's that blowing across a bottle noise. It's a real sort of intense, low, what they call the boom. And with a mature bird who's fed well, they will make you can call them a 3 or a 4 or a 5 boomer. Well, they'll boom in sequence, and then they have to regain themselves. It will take a couple of minutes, and then they'll do it again. It's a boom chain, and little young birds will be trying their luck, but they might only manage 1 or 2. So again, Peter Langlands on Facebook has some great footage of booming bittern near Lake Ellesmere, I think. Love Bittern coordinate groups from all around the country. You can download their app, which makes it very straightforward, and their support is phenomenal. If you email them, lovebittern@gmail.com, they will really dig in and help you get the hang of it. And you go out on 3 nights are designated in each month, and you would go out on one of those nights when the weather's good, record where you are, what you hear, whether it's something or nothing, and send in that data. The idea is that rather than you guys in Tauranga recording your bittern boom and then the next week me recording my bittern boom, it could be the same bird. It doesn't really tell us anything about numbers. But if we're doing it on those particular times each month for those 3 months, then we're getting a much better, much firmer idea of bittern distribution and activity. Again, it's only for the males, but it's really important data. And it's genius because, like those art competitions or the workshops, it's a fantastic way to get people involved. It's kind of like Kiwi listening or something like that. It's a really fantastic way to learn about and be inspired about the bittern.
So if we zoom out a bit more and look on the world stage, they aren't just in New Zealand. What does it mean to restore them here?
From my perspective, New Zealand has this clean, green image, and I think we really need to start stepping up and actually participating in that. We need to stop cashing in on a bunch of words and start really doing it. And so saving a species from extinction with community-led conservation is truly inspiring. It's something that the rest of the world can take for their own hope and strategies from there with whatever challenges they're dealing with. What needs to happen in order for that to happen would be so beneficial to New Zealand. So it will be communities coming together, supporting and inspiring each other. It would be the restoration of wetland fragments and significant wetlands across the nation. It would be really consistent pest control, awareness about dog control. And so all of those things would be so beneficial just to us, but then to be able to hold that up for other countries to look at. It's cementing New Zealand's reputation, making it real rather than just words, and B, really, inspirational, aspirational for other countries to follow that lead.
Yeah, I think we trade on our image of clean green New Zealand, and we put the conservationists sometimes as those hippies in the corner. But there's tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of economic output, trade deals, commitments, tourism, that if we don't get our act together soon, guys, this is going to start declining.
I think it already has started declining.
And I don't want to be calling out alarm bells or anything. There's enough people doing that. But like, this isn't just an environmental problem and opportunity. It's also economic. So, when I think about what I want my kids to inherit, what I want to give as an ancestor, there's always a financial element, but you can't separate that from the ecological element. They are so intertwined, even if we don't recognize it necessarily.
And that's something that's always struck me about working with the Forest Bridge Trust, is how we're engaging community. So it's communities who are doing it. We're just providing the tools and the skills. It's not us coming in and doing anything to other people. We are helping them, helping communities to look after their landscapes, and how much people are just like me before I came into conservation. They love their area and they relish the opportunity to keep it pristine and beautiful and, unique and all of those things. And that, quite by the by, has a massive impact economically.
So, Helen, if you could wave a magic wand, you've got magical powers, just imagine for a moment, and you could do anything you like with bittern conservation, and we jumped into a time machine and we transported 10 or 50 years into the future, what would it look like?
I've seen it a couple of times where financial abundance meets capability and skill in the conservation, wisdom, capability and skill in the conservation space. That is what I wish for. I wish for high net worth individuals to consistently invest in significant landscape scale projects and empowering the community. Again, not top down, but helping communities, because people already care, like we've been talking about, and empowering them to actually do the stuff that they want to do. I love the ethos of your podcast, where it's like people who are doing important mahi are doing it and don't have time or energy often, or interest, because their egos are very small, to tell other people about these stories and share these ideas. And so that's what this podcast is for. And likewise, people who are doing the mahi, they often don't have time to create significant influxes of money that can make such a massive difference. And I think, high net worth individuals, they care as well. And they don't have that expertise and the ability to do it forever and ever and ever. But if they make that investment in the community, then the community can do it forever and ever and ever. Even just the Forest Bridge, for example, there would be 3, significant new restored wetlands, which are providing breeding habitat for bittern. People are planting the sides of roads to make sure that when bittern are taking off, they have to gain height before they're crossing the road. They're not just crossing at car height because of their prehistoric, flight paths. They're creaking up, taking ages to gain height, means they just get bashed by cars. And that there are lots of little wetlands like mine, 20, 30, 40, 50, who have been restored and maintaining that restoration so that bittern have somewhere to feed, fledglings have somewhere to feed, and that is happening in myriad examples across the country. And people's mental health is really being boosted. The community glue is really strong. There's mitigation for flooding events and slip events that, are increasing with global warming. Yeah. And it doesn't have to have the huge influx of money, but that's what if I had a magic wand, that's what I would wish for, because that could create innovation and advances in technology and all sorts of things we haven't even thought of yet. It could create more jobs. It doesn't all have to be volunteer led, which again makes communities stronger, makes them more resilient, creates people who know how to make a difference, who have skills from very young, and creates that connection between young and old. That's what I would love to, peep at over the next 30 or 50 years or have a glimpse of, because there's lots of things you can do with money. And I think none would be as valuable or as exciting or rewarding as investing in solid conservation efforts for the long term.
Love it.
Second that, love it.
Magic wand waved.
Hey, Helen, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge today. There's one question that we ask every single podcast guest, which is, what does conservation mean to you?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it before, is it means hope and it means purpose and it means really creating a difference. We have to look after the earth so that the earth can look after us. And it means that. It really does.
How can people get involved and support your work at the Forest Bridge Trust? And I think you mentioned the Great Matuku Muster as well.
So people need to, for the Great Matuku Muster, they need to find lovebittern.com. There's some really fantastic reading and resources on their site. That's a fantastic way to support Bittern. And for the Forest Bridge Trust, if anybody's keen to contact me personally, I'm Helen at theforestbridgetrust.org.nz, and that website, theforestbridgetrust.org.nz, it's like a tongue twister, that's got lots of resources. It's got a donation button. Obviously, we're really keen for support in all its forms, but we also need volunteers for projects. So if you're a landowner within the Forest Bridge or through South Head as well, then we would love to work with you for trapping. We also do monitoring and all sorts of things like that. We have paid services now as we're transitioning out of jobs for nature. So we do trapping, installing trap networks of all kinds. We do toxin work for rats and possums, and we do monitoring and pest plant spraying as well. So all those sorts of things are detailed on our website. And we also have a great Facebook community group. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram. So yeah, those are the ways that you can get in touch.
Thank you, Helen. It's been a really fascinating chat. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and time and knowledge.
Both of you have called my wisdom, and I just want to really encourage other people. I am just a person who has become fascinated and excited about the bittern and all obviously the amazing creatures there are in New Zealand, from the kiwi all the way through. But I'm just a person who's got excited about it. And all of this excitement and connection and involvement and information you can absorb and share, that's available to every single one of us. You don't have to be an amazing scientist or a genius. You can just get out there and start getting involved where in an area that feels great for you. But I'd strongly suggest the bittern because it's awesome.
No bias.
I totally agree with you there. We all have a role to play, and yeah, you just have to follow your curiosity sometimes.
That's exactly it, Anna. Yeah, it's follow your curiosity. Take action.
Thank you, Helen.
Awesome.
Kia
Thank
ora.
you.